Hey, I'm Jeff and welcome back to another video. I just bought my wishlist plant, the Monstera deliciosa aurea. I also have a Thai constellation and elbow as well as a few regular monsteras, which I'll show you guys as examples throughout this video. This one specifically is a mid cut, so I thought I'd make a video explaining the different types of cuts. There is a top cutting, a mid cut, as well as a stem cutting, just so that you can have a better understanding of what you're buying, or even if you're propagating it yourself. So let's get into it. This is a top cutting which I propagated a few months ago. It's got absolutely gorgeous leaves. It has the fenestrations, the slits, and the holes in the leaves, which we all, I guess, kind of strive for. The top cutting is the preferred cutting, and it's often reflected in the price. These are way more than a mid cut or even a stem cutting. And the same thing with these elbows and aureas and Thai constellations. The top cutting is the preferred cut, and it's basically you're just cutting off the top of the plant. Just make the cut in between two nodes, and basically just take the top cutting and you can propagate it in water. You can put it right in soil or even air layer it, and then you end up with a cutting like this. And the reason why it's so popular, or this is the preferred cut, is because basically the new growth or the next newest leaf should just be a continuation of something very similar to this one. So it shouldn't really size down at all. It should be similar size. You should still get the fenestrations as well as the holes in the leaf. So there really isn't, or there shouldn't be any drastic or different change when you get a new leaf. Now my Monstera elbow and my aurea are mid cuts, and basically what a mid cut is a propagation from the middle of the stem. So you have one node. You do need a node as well as an axillary bud or a growing eye, which I'll show you here in a second, in order for the plant to produce new growth. It's not going to grow from the top of the stem like a top cutting would. It's basically just a section. So here's an internode, here's an internode. This is the section, or this is what is referred to as a mid cut. It is one node, essentially one leaf, like this one right here, and you'll have that axillary bud, which, like I said, I'll show you here in a second. So the aurea has a small little section of the stem, so it is a midsection, so it would be something similar to this. So this area right here, you can see it's been cut right here and it's been cut right here. Here is the leaf, it's attached to the node, so there's the petiole, and then here's the leaf. I'm going to show you the same thing on my elbow. Here is the original leaf, so we'll follow that down to the stem. Here is the original stem, so you can see it's cut at the bottom and it's cut right here as well. You can see it has pushed out a side growth from the little section of the stem, the original section, and it's now producing its own new plant from that axillary bud, and now it has two new leaves. Here's the newest one, it's still sizing up. Now for the most important thing, you have to make sure that your mid-cut has an axillary bud or a growing eye. So I would suggest before purchasing or buying a plant, get the seller to show you the growing eye. Otherwise, you will not produce a new growth point. You will basically just have one leaf and one stem, one useless stem, and it may grow roots. So always make sure that you ask whoever you're buying it from to show you the growing eye. Here is I'll show you on the aurea here in a second, but here's a top cutting which I've been propagating in soil, and I want to show you, just for reference, the growing eye. So here's the front of the plant, and here is the leaf, the petiole, and you can see there is the node right here. I'm going to flip the plant around. On the same side as the leaf, just behind it, is where you will find the growing eye. So I just laid the cutting down, but you can see just above the node, behind the leaf, there is a small little oval structure, and it's often raised, so it's a little bit higher. It's basically like a bump along the stem. This is the growing eye, and this is the only point where a new growth or a new stem will pop out from. So if you don't have one of these growing eyes, typically behind the leaf, you will not produce a new plant. So now on this one, I'm just going to take the plank out temporarily just so I can show you a good shot of the growing eye. So here's the front of the plant, here's the leaf, here's the leaf node, there's an aerial root, so I'm going to spin it around. And on the back side, on the same side as the leaf, you can see the growing eye right here. So this round kind of oval structure, and if I turn it around like this, you can see it is a little bit raised from the stem as well. So this is what you need to look for, the growing eye. So if this was a mid-cut, you would have a section probably cut right here and then right below it. So this is the stem portion. very similar to the Aurea right here that you can propagate, but you do need this little kind of round oval axillary bud growing eye in order for a new stem to branch out and new growth to develop. So here's the Aurea, and I just kind of positioned it so you can see the axillary bud right there, the little oval structure, a little bit raised. This is where it's going to get new growth from only. It's not going to produce a stem from the cut end. It's only going to get new growth from the growing eye. So when I did purchase this, the seller did provide a picture of not only the leaf but the growing eye. The reason why this is not the preferred cut is sometimes it can take a very long time for any new growth to pop out from that axillary bud, and when you do get new growth, it typically reverts to a juvenile leaf. So you will not get the fenestrations or the slits in the leaves. It will basically be a solid just regular leaf, and then as it grows and matures, it will size up and eventually it will get the fenestrations as well as the holes in the leaves. That is why it's not the preferred method, but these are often cheaper than a top cut simply for that reason. So that's why I bought this one, because it was definitely more affordable than a top cutting. Now I'm going to quickly talk about variegation, and it's really difficult to predict variegation on a plant. Again, I'm not an expert. Just from the research that I've done, you want to make sure that you have at least some variegation. So for this Aurea, you want some yellow and green on the growing eye. And if there is a combination of both on the growing eye as well as the stem, then most likely you will produce a new stem or a new leaf that does have some variegation on it. Now going back to the elbow, you can see it has a nice combination of green and white variegation, and if you come to the stem, you can see it has an equal complement of kind of like 50% green and 50% white variegation, and that is reflected in the newest leaves as well, which are absolutely gorgeous. Now if you had a section of the stem with a growing eye that was primarily white, then most likely you're going to get an all white leaf, which of course we don't want, because if you have all white, then there's going to be no green chlorophyll to help the plant photosynthesize. So that's why I'm okay with a little bit less white variegation and more green. So that's just a very basic understanding of variegation on a plant. It's very unpredictable. Now for my little Thai constellation. This one's pretty immature. It's quite juvenile, but you can see along the stem it has some green and white, or kind of that cream color. This one is still too young to be able to see any growing eyes on it, so do not propagate a very small, like juvenile plant. Yeah, you basically won't have a growing eye. Or one that you can see anyway, so it's basically just a gamble. Okay, I just noticed this on my Monstera elbow right here as well. So here's the mid-cut section, here's the new growth point. You can see right here, the growth point has come from this node right here, which had a leaf on the right side. The leaf is no longer there. Just above it is another node, and it has a leaf. And I actually spun this plant around, or I flipped it around, to see if there was a growing eye on the back. See if I can get it to focus. I don't know if you can see it, but right here there is a little bump. It's kind of covered over, looks like kind of calloused from the cutting. There is a small little bump and a growth point. So I could actually take this node, I can cut it right here, and I can propagate this for a second plant. So I could cut it right here, and I could propagate this as another mid-cut or mid-section, and make two plants out of this one, just because it does have two nodes. So here's one node and two nodes. I got two nodes from this Monstera elbow. I'm not going to do that right now, but at some point I may actually take this cutting and make an entirely new plant. Now I just want to briefly talk about stem cuttings, and basically what this is it's a node or a portion of the stem, like a mid-cut, that doesn't have a leaf. So this is often referred to as a wet stick. I would only ever buy a stem cutting or a wet stick if you trust the seller. A lot of times it will be sold as a different type of plant, so you might not even get a Monstera. So unless you trust the seller or you're very comfortable with finding the growing eye and the structures to look for, then I would basically say save your money. And then if you have a section of the stem like this, as long as it has variegation on it, then you should get variegation on the leaf as well. So the stem cuttings or the wet sticks, unless I like absolutely trust someone, I wouldn't go out and buy them, because a lot of times they're still being sold for a pretty good price on like Facebook Marketplace and that sort of things, but you don't really know what you're getting. That's kind of what I'm getting at. So someone could tell you that this is a Monstera aurea, but there's not a lot of yellow on this stem. So you might just be getting a regular Monstera or an entirely different plant. Also, you may have heard the term spent node. I've just done a little bit of research on that, and basically what a spent node is when you have a plant that produces the growth from the axillary bud or the growing eye, and someone cuts it off. So they cut this section of the plant off, they remove it, and then they go ahead and kind of resell the node portion right here with the leaf. So my understanding of it is once that node has produced like one new growth point and you cut it off, it will not produce another stem from that node. It's basically, it's done. So that's why it's called a spent node. Now I might be entirely wrong. I've never tried it before. I have no experience with cutting off a new growth point and then seeing if it'll regrow again. I did read one article that says it's possible, but most other articles that I've read have said that if you have a growth point from an axillary bud and you cut it off, it will not regrow. I'm just kind of reminding you that whenever you have a mid-cut, just make sure you get the seller to show you the growing eye of that exact plant. Otherwise, basically you're just getting a leaf. It'll grow roots, but it'll never regrow into its own new stem, or it won't get a new stem is what I'm trying to get at. So now I'm going to talk about seeds, and again, I'm not an expert. I've never bought Monstera seeds, but I am guilty as well. Before I bought this albo, I actually did a little bit of research online, and I thought I could just go out and buy some albo seeds for much cheaper and grow them in my home and eventually get some nice beautiful plants. Apparently it's a scam. There's minimal chance, and I've read a lot of articles saying there is 0 chance that you will get any variegation from a Monstera albo seed. Apparently it doesn't transfer the genetic material needed in the seed. You'll basically get just a regular green Monstera. The albo, from my understanding, is that it was found as a naturally variegated plant. That's why it's very unstable, and every albo that is produced is from I don't know, maybe one plant or a group of plants that had natural variegation, whereas the Thai constellation, the variegation is more stable because it's produced in, I don't know, a lab, I guess. I don't know if you can buy Thai constellation seeds or not. Again, I'm not an expert. I just do research and reading online. It's a gamble if you buy seeds, is what I'm saying, and you might not even get the Monstera plant as well. So just a word of caution when buying seeds. You don't know what you're going to get. For an example, I bought a bunch of desert rose seeds a number of years ago. I potted them up, and honestly, they just look like weeds. It was definitely not a desert rose seed. So just be cautious when you are buying seeds online. You're probably not getting the plant that you think you're going to get, and yeah. Don't want to waste money thinking you're going to get a Monstera albo when you end up with a weed or something like that. So I would say don't buy seeds unless, again, it's from a person that you trust, and you're probably not going to get an albo. You're probably just going to get a regular Monstera, but that's okay too. There are 2 more plants I don't show, and they're just the regular green Monstera. Here's a smaller top cutting, which I have propagated in water. Look at these thick, juicy roots. So this is definitely ready to go into a pot of soil, and I'm just looking for the growing eye on this one. It might be hidden underneath this portion of the stem, and I'm just looking. So yeah, right here on the back side, there is a growing eye as well. So this, you can see this portion right here is where it previously had a leaf, and behind the leaf is where that growing eye has formed. So that's pretty cool. And then the next leaf above it, it'll be probably underneath this kind of little sheath here. The new growth from this top cutting, I'm just going to put it back in water. The new growth will come from this leaf. I don't see any, just slightly raised right there. It's almost like a little triangle piece. on the back side of the petiole. That's where a new leaf will form from. Look at these roots. That is juicy. I don't change the water. I simply, once it uses up the water or it evaporates, I just top it up. But I never change the water. I don't, put fresh water in once a week or anything like that. It looks, kind of grimy. There's a little bit of algae in there, but that's okay. This one's been doing really well, and this is how you water propagate it. So typically you want at least 2, maybe 3 nodes or 3 leaves on the cutting. That is ideal, and you just stick it in a container of water and let the roots grow. Super satisfying. Okay, this last one is a top cutting which I bought off Facebook Marketplace for like $20. It has an absolutely massive leaf with the fenestrations as well as the holes. When I brought it home, it was propagated in water. A little while after, I did put it in soil, and it was unfurling a new leaf. But I think because I potted up in soil and I changed the environment, it got a tiny little leaf, or I shouldn't say tiny, but like maybe a regular size leaf with the fenestrations as well as the holes. But look at the size difference between the two. So I kind of laughed that the newest leaf didn't really size up. And like I said, I think that's my fault. Just changing it too much, or such a drastic change going from my environment from the one that I bought it from, and then changing it from water to soil. So I'm hoping that the next leaf will be as large as this one again. Obviously it's taking its time right now establishing a root system, but it looks like it's starting to produce a new leaf and stem from the little baby mature one, which is absolutely hilarious. I think it's super cute. So this one, it did yellow a little bit at the top, but I just provided a little bit more light. I'll show you here in a second the setup, but I did clamp a grow light to the top of the support stake, and now it's getting much brighter light from the top down. So yeah, I'm hoping that it gets some large leaves again. But otherwise, I think that's going to be pretty much it for this video. I hope I explained everything appropriately and in detail so that you can understand what you're getting when you buy a Monstera plant. Thanks for watching my videos, everyone. Take care. Bye.